everybody to our panel on interdisciplinary frontiers in community engaged scholarship. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Scott Frickel. I'm a professor of sociology in IBES, and I'll be moderating today's conversation. Community engaged scholarship is a very important topic. I'm assuming that's why everybody decided to show up today. It's something that Brown University has become increasingly committed to in the past several years, most recently visualized or institutionalized in a new vice president for community engagement, Mary Jo Callan, who began that position, I think, in September of this past year. It's also something that is prioritized in IBES's new strategic plan, which if you haven't seen it, it's available on our website, and I encourage everybody to take a look at it. Since we only have about 50 minutes, realistically, for this conversation, I'm going to try to squeeze 2 rounds of questions in for our panelists. I've asked them to keep their responses relatively brief, 5 to 8 minutes. I will hold you guys to that, or I will try to. Or less. Less is fine. The shorter the better, in a way, because what I'd really like to do is end today with questions from the audience, and particularly from students. And if we can branch out and have a sort of more freewheeling conversation, all the better. Okay. Let me start with introductions, introducing our speakers, beginning with Camilo Viveiros, who is the director of the George Wiley Center, a statewide multiracial economic justice organizing project in Rhode Island. A longtime organizer for racial, economic, and environmental justice, Camilo has built multi-issue alliances and coalitions that have brought together diverse organizations around social, economic, environmental, and racial justice. With a lifelong commitment to sharing organizing tools and effective social movement strategy, Camilo has developed trainings and workshops on community organizing, grassroots base building, increasing public participation, creative direct action, participatory strategy, and campaign development for groups across the country, not just in Rhode Island. Next to me, Dr. Sacoby Wilson is a professor with the Maryland Institute for Applied Environmental Health and Department of Epidemiology and Biostatistics at the University of Maryland College Park School of Public Health, where he directs the Center for Community Engagement, Environmental Justice, and Health. Dr. Wilson has over 20 years of experience as an environmental health scientist and works primarily in partnership with community-based organizations to study and address environmental justice and health issues and translate research to action. I could go on and on, but I'm going to keep that short. Dawn King needs no introduction in this audience, but I will give her one because she's so deserving. Dawn is a senior lecturer and director of undergraduate studies at IBES. She earned her Ph.D. in political science and environmental policy at Colorado State University, the state we share in common. She currently serves as the chair of Red Tomatoes Board of Trustees and previously served as chair of the Rhode Island Food Policy Council. She teaches 2 engaged scholar courses at Brown, one on local food systems and one titled Humans, Nature, and the Environment. During the past 10 years or so, she has worked with over 1,200 students, partnering with over 60 unique organizations to complete community partner-directed projects. So we have a really experienced and exciting panel for us today. I'm going to open questions with Camilo, who I'd like to get a response. As your unique perspective as a longtime community organizer, I'm wondering, what does the term community engagement mean for you and for the folks you work with on the ground? And from your experience working with academic institutions like Brown, but I'm sure other universities and colleges in the area as well, what works and what doesn't work? And what should students and faculty be mindful of when we engage community?
Sure. So thank you so much for having us, and thank you so much for the long-time commitment working with our members at the George Wiley Center. So when I think of community engagement, the first question I think about is the dichotomy between students and community, and how examples like Dawn's class really start to challenge that, right? And burst this bubble that sometimes folks feel of isolation on the campus. I grew up in this region, and I call it the Brown paradox, where grassroots organizations often have a love-hate relationship with Brown University, right? Folks either sometimes villainize, or the other extreme is glorifying. And really, the type of concrete relationship-based collaborations that are being built here is what allows us to develop trust, right? So as like a working class person from an immigrant background, we can like have a chip on our shoulder, we can harbor resentment, but that's not gonna help us really leverage the type of power and collaboration that we need, right? And then thinking on the perspective from Brown University, we need to challenge the notion that it's a one-sided thing, because I drew this little popular education spiral that is from community organizing that often challenges the idea that ordinary people don't have knowledge, right? That our experience isn't useful, and that we need, a savior that's smarter than us to come to us and, tell us what it's like, right? And I think Dawn's class really shows that students can learn from community organizers, from the community, and really we're looking for reciprocity, right? We're not looking for a one-sided thing. I don't know, probably most people have heard this whole Abraham Maslow of when your only tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And there are some of those orientations that folks at universities are more predisposed for, right? So, and I think this class that we're talking about does a wonderful job at challenging students to not think, here's another class to write a report on. Here's another class that you're going to sit in front of a screen or just go to the library. It really challenges students to work in the community, and I'll just give a few examples. So, we did a transit justice study, and the study comprised of teaching students to work with community members and go down to Kennedy Plaza, right? And collect survey results, not just for the sake of having that data, but to actually mobilize for Rosa Parks Day, right? And to take action. And so, I'm a fan of participatory action research and really breaking down those dichotomies and challenging the sometimes perceived contradiction between a community scholar, right, and where knowledge comes from. So even before the birth of the George Wiley Center, George Wiley himself, right, when they founded the National Welfare Rights Organization, it was built on this kind of collaboration between sociologists, social workers. There was a perceived understanding out there that was prominent that folks were taking advantage of the welfare system, and certain people of color were actually getting more than they so-called deserved, right? Through surveys and through community-based research, the opposite was proven. What people knew on the streets was happening, but was not reflected in the political rhetoric or in the news. And that was the first campaign of the National Welfare Rights Organization. And it's no different than the work we do now, right? Another example I'll just give quickly was, I've been at the George Wiley Center about 11 years. When I started, folks with differently abled, folks with medical conditions, serious medical conditions, would be getting shut off in April and May, getting their utilities shut off. And we had nice forms for people to fill out. We had protections that were on state statute. And we would organize people to take action and say, what's going on with these protections, right? And the utility company and the agency that was in charge of enforcing those protections kept on saying that we didn't know what we were talking about, right? Once again, these community folks, George Wiley Center, you don't know what you're talking about, you're not the experts, we're the experts, right? So a student, a Brown University student, worked with us, and also a Brown University grad student who was working at a law firm, worked with us to help us turn our members into plaintiffs, and we did a civil suit, and we won that suit, right? Because when we got in front of a judge, they said, no, actually, George Wiley Center, you're absolutely right. So right now, 7,000 people are protected from shut-off because of that. And I explain this story because if you talk to Erin, or you talk to the other student, I think they would recognize that they learned, right, more than they offered as far as their skills. And that's lost sometimes. That's lost in the world. And there would be no civil suit if it wasn't for the community-based organizing going on. So I'm excited to talk more together about how we can expand these opportunities, because I try to work in good faith and assume that most students want to make a difference, right? It's just people need more opportunities, and we need to expand our capacity and offer more classes modeled on what Dawn's doing, figuring out other ways that we can work together. So this panel is exciting to see in action how we can kind of grow this together, our capacity for community-based research and action.
Great, thanks. Sacoby, same question for you. What works, what does community engagement mean? What in your experience works and doesn't work so well?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So, I mean, when I do my presentations, I talk about the community engagement continuum. And you have outreach, consultation, involvement, participatory, and community driven. So if y'all can visualize that, and I showed it last night, as you move from left to right, communication increases, trust increases, reciprocity increases, right? If you want to really do good community engagement, as I've been telling everybody, you have to have, it's about having good relationships. So what are the characteristics of good relationships, right? You gotta have respect, Aretha Franklin, I saw this thing, I said, you gotta have Aretha Franklin, you gotta have trust, have to have openness. And when you have good relationships, when you have bad relationships. You want to be modeled, so those good relationships are the foundation, they're the building blocks of good partnerships, okay? And so for me, it's been an interesting, trajectory that I've been on. I mean, as I said to many of you, I've been trained, like my primary folks who train me have been community leaders, right? And I also, for me, as a researcher, scholar, advocate, I get my energy, my love, my emotional nutrition from working with communities. That's why I say I gotta do one foot in, one foot out. So that engagement, you talk about the learning part, the healing part and the growing part comes from working with communities. Because as I said, I came from a community that had some of these issues. As a kid, I didn't recognize this environmental justice. Now still to this day, I'm not saying we weren't like right there. It was within half a mile of my house, a highway, half a mile of my house, a sewage treatment plant that made it look more of a mile. Then my mom says, don't forget the landfill. There's a nuclear power plant that's 20 miles on the road. I had these hazards I grew up around, right? And so for me, you're doing community engagement, you got to really value, just stay in the context. Community members are the real subject matter experts. That's what Dr. McLean, Mildred McLean from Harambe House, we're the subject matter experts. You have your PhD, Dr. Wilson, but the community science has to be valued, right? And so when you're doing community engagement, we have to uplift the community cultural knowledge systems, right? We have to make sure that we are valuing the contextual expertise. We have to make sure, as you stated, students, you're learning life. Immersive, problem-based learning, but action-oriented and solutions-focused. This program, that's how you get, one of the things I say last night is that my spouse calls them Jacobiism. You just can't problematize, you gotta solutionize. Jesse Jackson Wood said, Jessica said it better. We just can't have classes where we're problematizing. You have to solutionize. So immersive, problem-based learning, which is community engaged, community-centered, justice-focused, but it's about solutions, right? And so when I have that relationship with communities, and we're on the same accord, my work in North Charleston, South Carolina, cut me off when I know I said 5 minutes earlier when you spent more time. Cut me off when you cut me off. But my work in North Charleston was with a group of black men who are primarily they're Muslim, right? New for me, right? But we really built strong relationships. We wrote a paper about this in, I forget which journal, but talking about our lessons learned, best practices in our partnership. It was that relationship building that really was key for us. We had like this men's circle that we would share about our experiences, being black men, and their experience being black men in North Charleston. And actually the community group, the local echelon small communities, they didn't organize initially around, I think the formation was initially around environmental injustice. It was around gun violence. The initial is gun violence, right? And then the port was going to expand. And then I think we talked in class about the reaction, right? The reaction to the port expanded, and then they formed a reaction to the port expanded. But they really started around gun violence, right? And these other types of hazards and stress to the community. So when engagement goes poorly, when, as I said earlier, it's all about, we're going to find a community partner, we got to get this grant proposal in. Let's find somebody. Let's get a letter of support. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Letter of support. And then the money runs out, and then you disappear. Or, that's not good engagement. So when you think about that continuum, you got to have outreach is not engagement. The outreach is one directional. It has to be bi-directional. It's not reciprocal. Having an advisory board is not good enough. It needs to be participatory action research, or it has to be community-driven research. To me, those are the gold standards. So if you think about the 5 kind of columns, those 2 are the ones that you should be focused on. The others help get you there. And technical assistance is a really important way, because a lot of times we need help on this project. Technical assistance is a really great way to start a relationship, start a partnership, because you may have a short-term deliverable. I mean, think about what you just talked about with the students. As a grad student, as I showed last night, we help to get people that get their roads paid for the first time, right? We help to get people sewer and water infrastructure for the first time. You can do that as a student. Y'all don't have to wait to have impact, but you can learn and have impact at the same time. So that service mission, community engagement, has to have a service mission to it, and to maximize impact. I think I'm talking too long. I'm gonna pass the mic.
We're good. Thanks. That's wonderful. Go on.
Sure. So, and I know I gave Scott my bio that really pointed out, the 1,200 students and 60. I was actually asked to compile that just a month ago, and I had no idea, actually. But what's interesting is that what works, and I said I've worked with over 60 unique organizations, what works best are my relationships with Camilo and African Alliance, and there's a solid group of 10 that are just amazing. We work together every single year. So out of those 60 groups, there's probably about 10 of them that I've worked with, that we've worked with, some in this room as well. Multiple times. And it's exactly what you're saying. It's where trust is developed. And also when you're doing these one-off projects, so it's, my engagement isn't necessarily this long-term research project, but it's these many one-off projects. And, it's being careful, and you brought this up yesterday at your talk, which I think is really one of the most important things. It's being careful not to be extractive of community partners, to listen to them, and when you do these, one of the obstacles sometimes is the engaged projects are boring, right? They are just not sexy at all. Hey guys, you get to do a database, right? You get to enter a lot of numbers into a spreadsheet. But it is about impact and how we communicate that impact and how our community partners and talking to students 2 years later and saying, oh, by the way, that data set was actually just presented to the state legislative branch, right? And so it's it's this balancing act of trust with our community partners, trust also with the students that we're going to follow through. We know that you spent a lot of hours doing this sometimes boring project. It's not always building hoop houses, right, or doing things like that. And what that impact is with the community. And I would also say a big part of success is myself, and I'm sure you, and I know other folks, faculty members in this room right now, is to be engaged yourself, right? How do I build trustful relationships with community organizations if I'm myself not engaged with community organizations? So it's saying yes when people ask you to serve on committees and subcommittees and double subcommittees and chairs and boards. There are so many out there. And fortunately, it's just something I love to do, and I would do it regardless if I thought of it as part of my job. But it's a really wonderful position to be in where it is kind of part of my job. I love serving on boards. I love meeting people in the city and at nonprofits. And that's how that kind of small trust relationship of how do you find these multiple projects every single year. We run 6 with a lot of students in the fall, and then we run up to 15 in the spring. But it's my own personal connections, and it's probably folks like Camilo as well that I've worked with forever, and they're talking to him, right? And he's going out there, and you know, somebody might mention something, and he might contact me and say, wait a second, I think I know somebody who can help you. So it's always about the connections, it's about the trust, it's knowing, and you know, it's important for me to communicate that you are not extracting, that there is co-learning, obviously, and for me especially on these short-term projects, it's demonstrating impact, and sometimes that means 1, 2, 3 years down the road.
Interesting. Thank you. I have an informational question. Out of those remaining 50 organizations that you don't work with all the time, how many still exist, or how many have folded? Do you know?
I believe they all still exist.
Ah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and, you know, so some of them are, you know, the City of Providence Office of Sustainability, right? So some of them are government organizations, some of them, not really many private institutions, but yeah, because I just looked at that list, I think almost all of them are still around.
That's remarkable to me because, you know, community organizations often have a very sort of short, many times have a very short lifetime, or they get reconstituted in many ways, which makes ongoing trust building
Right.
hard.
Right.
Yeah, it's one of the things that makes it hard. There's a lot of things in the academy that also make it difficult. So, second round of questions. Camilo, what are some of the various pathways you see for broadening and strengthening practices of community engagement? And here I'm thinking, my own sort of thinking around this is about how community engagement, how do we build community engagement, build these relationships beyond the constraints of academic calendars and course schedules and student projects, the one-offs, which in my experience often are fairly poorly aligned with community needs and the rhythms of community life.
Yeah, so, you know, we talked a little bit about resources, but, you know, resources have to be combined with relationships, right? Because it's not an elephant in the room, it's an opportunity, like, to make an institutional commitment. And like with Dawn's class, there was a commitment there to have enough TAs to have a robust student engagement. If there weren't those TAs there, we wouldn't have been able to have that scale. So I think we should imagine what would it look like if an introductory class, like Dawn's class, was multidisciplinary across the whole campus, at every department, every center, every initiative. What would it look like? What kind of input would that have on the community? You know, students sometimes 4 years after being in college, they're finally looking around to see how they can make a difference. How can we incentivize and institutionalize within the campus those type of opportunities with an eye toward, you know, folks that are directly affected. We want to be careful to not make people that are invisible, not only by stealing credit, right? Let's be real about this. We gotta make sure that a project that we thank the Brown University students, but we do not make low-income, you know, participants invisible.
Yep.
And we also want to make sure that, you know, BIPOC, low-income folks, disabled folks on campus don't feel like to do good as an individual, they need to ignore their own community, right? Or in our community. So what are the incentives that we can create for everyone to make a difference, but particularly for first-gen students, BIPOC, low-income people, to have the incentives, have the time, right, to actually not feel like you're betraying your community when you go to Brown University, right? And you're doing well as an individual, but you don't know how you're connecting, right, to the community right here in your backyard. So I'm excited about those ideas and how you can have, you know, student-initiated community-based research, like some people like to call it. And I think, you know, I'll just bring up a little Harvard rivalry. You know, how many people have heard of this guy, Marshall Gantz? Okay, so he's this person that worked with the United Farm Workers, and I was a community fellow with him up at Harvard University, which meant I had a little cohort of folks, and it was a community organizing class. And, you know, halfway through it, I met with Marshall because, we were studying community organizing, but the orientation was charity. The understanding of a process was shallow. And it's understandable if you have an elite college where people might be taught, like, give back, right? Give back. Charity isn't bad in itself, but if we're talking about change, we have to restructure how we think about things. And it's not just the issues, making a difference on the issues, it's theories of change, right? And the learning is deeper than just your research skills, right? Because there's a conflict sometimes, theory of change. The myth of meritocracy, how many people talk about that from the get-go, right? When you get here, let's talk about it. We want to diminish the hard work it takes to be here, and we don't want to play into the myth of meritocracy and how it reinforces all systems of oppression and inequality. So, I like the saying, like, guilt equals unused privilege. Like, we need to give people opportunities, while they have privilege, you gotta use it. Not rhetoric, not just rhetoric, not moralism, tangible, concrete action, partnered with the most directly affected frontline communities right in our backyard. And it's not either or. We're talking about the liberation of your own students, right, too. You're part of it, and really diffusing that. So I'm so excited to hear more of the news and more of the plans, and we'll write a letter. I don't know if it's going to get you any funding, right? But the support, right? We need to be reciprocal, and we need to support when you're making strides to scale up, and we're really excited about that.
Sacoby, pathways, strengthening, broadening, community engagement, maybe from your university's perspective.
Well, I think, as I said, I think it was in the conversation earlier today, y'all have a VP for community engagement. We don't have one yet. So we're kind of, I said earlier, I've been Don Quixote for years. We're gonna get that VP for community engagement. Every school should have an associate dean for community engagement. You gotta build the infrastructure, you have to have these courses. We should have degree programs, minors, concentrations, and graduate degree programs in community engagement. We should have team promotion metrics, right, in community engagement. You need all of that. And you also, I think I mentioned last night the model of Dr. Bull and Dr. Wright's model, the community university model. We should be creating really transition to that model of integrating community in. And also, when we talk about the student part, I said earlier when I was on the board of Community Campus Partnership for Health, I joined the board to help on the community side, not the campus side. So how are we making sure that the community capacity is addressed, right? Capacity building, capacity maintenance, okay? So, I think, when we talk about pathways, what we're doing now, I've gotten some, funding, as I said to y'all last night. I've got more funding than I've gotten my whole career in 2 years. It's sad, it's blessings and sad at the same time. I've been doing this work with basically on fumes. And that also, I'm not answering your question, but speaks to the need of academia to change, right? And create a space for us to do this work in a safe way. Because I think part of liberation said the liberation of students, Camilo, is like, how do you liberate faculty? Because if we're in environments that don't really support and value us, it's hard to do that work with communities. And then I always joke, it's a community university partnership. No, it isn't. It's a community individual faculty member partnership at many universities.
That's right.
Or a core group of faculty members. So how do we got to transform it. We got to create the pathways of liberation, Camilo said, for the students, but also the faculty, so we also participate together in the liberation science. And I talked about liberation science last night. And that, I think that's important. But also, for me, part of on the community side, what we're trying to do, and to follow on Camilo's point about community capacity building, we have a climate justice fellows program for people 18 plus, and we're trying to build a community so folks who come from those communities are actually part of the fabric of change. We have a Mid-Atlantic EJ Academy we're trying to launch as well. We have an undergraduate EJ Scholars Program for BIPOC students, and also trying to engage students from MSIs, particularly historically black colleges who are in our region. And so I'm really excited about that because those HBCUs in our region are, guess what? In the communities that experience these environmental, climate, and energy injustices, right? And so that to me is really a good structure for how you do the work and create different pathways. So you need a pathway for the students, you need a pathway for the faculty, you need a pathway for community, right? And we need to have a pathway of kind of a multi-sectoral pathway as well. So you have that other partners, government entities as partners as well, other nonprofits, even big greens. I beat up on a little bit today, but as I said, I have friends who are doing good work in big greens. They're trying to do the same thing I'm trying to do in academia, transform from the inside. And so we have to see that intersectionality across the issues, across our sectors as well. And it's coming back to my work in Maryland again, and then I'm gonna pass the mic, so I'm gonna go too long, because I want to get time to long with it. I'm sorry. So I'm just trying to think. So when it comes to the work that we've been doing, we do a lot. I engage a lot of communities, and there's so much need, right? So one of the things I will leave and pass the mic back again. I'm gonna go back to my previous point. How do we make sure that we're doing science that serves? That's a pathway to liberation. Science that serves, right? And that I think is maybe antithetical for a lot of universities, how they're set up, right? What their traditions have been. We have to change our traditions of science. So even calling communication research, just a science, should be, that's what we do, right? That concept needs to be removed. If we just get to the point it's all integrated, that's how we do science. Not community science, not citizen science, just put a label in the front. It's science, right? That's what we should be shooting for. I'm done.
So that's great. So I just wanted to share a thought on this back, which is that, it strikes me that this conversation is suggesting the ways in which the environmental justice movement is shifting from, or not shifting, but has moved into the academy. And I think it may be really helpful for us faculty to begin thinking about ourselves in that way as movement activists trying to change an institution. There's movement work to be done inside Brown, inside other universities, and inside the regulatory agencies that we work with as well.
Definitely not you. Is this on camera?
Yes, it is, and it's streaming, so darn, I'm gonna give you a...
You gotta love a panel where it's like, wait, is this being filmed?
Thank you for reminding me. Sorry, President Paxton.
Love you,
Don, go ahead.
Sure, and I can keep it quick. I mean, because we just had two phenomenal responses to that. But I agree. I mean, one of the things to, what you were saying is that internally to broaden and engage scholarship and really engage science, and just science, to really do that, I actually just looked at some stats the other day, and you might be surprised to know that 65% of engaged scholar courses at Brown University are taught by non-tenure or tenure-track faculty. The vast majority, 65%. Lecturers, senior lecturers, adjuncts, professors of practice, postdocs, graduate students take up the reins on engaged scholarship. And it really does speak to what you're saying. As an institution, it's just not counted in your tenure, so why on earth would you waste your time doing that when you need to publish, right? And you need to publish in these journals. And quite honestly, journals don't really like to publish on Providence case studies. I mean, that might depend on discipline, but it's not real sexy in political science to talk about anything local, right? You're not getting into
I have a journal that you can submit it to.
Yeah, all right.
And they do publish Rhode Island case studies.
All right, see, there we go. And so there needs to be a lot of work internally. And Camilo mentioned, I mean, I've been lucky to be within IBES, who has really already pushed. They take it seriously. They commit time and resources and a ton of undergraduate TAs who just do a phenomenal job of cat wrangling every single semester. And they're really into it and they're really passionate about it. And then beyond, I think, Brown has a lot of trust building to do themselves. You're absolutely right that some of these partnerships are really the faculty's partnership with community partners. And not the university's partnership with community partners. And as you kind of started off with, there are a lot of community organizations who don't want Brown's help and they don't trust Brown. And the university has to build those relationships. And it's not something that can be done overnight. It is a very long process. we do that. The VP position is a newer position, so I really do hope that we're gonna see a lot more along those lines to really broaden and to, really encourage and provide resources for all of our students who just do, you all really want it, and I think so many of our students really get it, that it's not about us going down and showing whoever how to do something, but it's about this mutual relationship. And I will say, you brought up talking about one specific student like 10 years ago, give or take, Aaron. I still keep in contact with Aaron, who's about to graduate from Yale Law School for human rights law. And so, I mean, that connection, and I think students get it, like, first experience really with that was with the George Wiley Center, and now he's going to be a lawyer and fighting the good fight, and that warms my heart, and hopefully that's inspiring for students as well.
Thank you, everybody. We've got 15 minutes, which is perfect, for questions from the audience. I want to prioritize student questions. Yes?
I was just going to ask, I know that there's such a big, it matters so much, the relationship building aspect, but I have seen how it is a struggle to institutionalize these relationships. Often if there is one person or several people that are very connected and they really hold this work as an individual, how do you then, institutionalize it and pass it on these relationships?
So the question, like, how to institutionalize these relationships?
The relationship building aspect.
I think it's really difficult because of those trust relationships and because of that personal trust. There's part of me that doesn't want it to be institutionalized. I don't want you to institutionalize, George Wiley. But I think, to get more at that, I think some really strong leadership at the top, and I think maybe through the Swear Center, who does that. It seems like there's going to be a core group of people that really understand these. Hopefully they get to know a little bit more about who individual faculty members are working with, what organizations have already worked with us and who wants to reach out to us. But maybe, like I said earlier, more importantly is which organizations don't reach out to us or don't want to reach out to us. And to get much deeper into the why behind that. So I think, to have something a little bit more centralized where, decisions can be made, where resources can be given out, I think is really important, but at the same time, it's really hard to institutionalize trust.
I think one thing to think about is when your description of what Brown does with the George Wiley Center is what Dawn does with the George Wiley Center. And so institutionalizing that relationship would be somehow making the Brown piece of it more than just you, right? In some way that has a life of its own. Institutional, yeah. So.
I just want to follow up on that. I mean, it was 10 plus years ago when the university was really trying to gear this up, and I remember they asked faculty to list the organizations and the people they were working with, and I remember me and my colleagues just said, we're not giving you that information. Like, what are you going to mess with? But at the same time, a lot of us were really looking to the Swear Center to significantly increase the support at the community partner level, because this type of long-term relationship that you speak to, you have to maintain that, and it's a heavy lift for you, and the people to do that. So I guess Sacoby, maybe in your experience, do you know of examples where there's been that type of institutional connection, where there's essentially, I think it's great we have a VP, but a VP isn't going to be making relationships at the grassroots level with these organizations. So do you have experience with that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I was thinking as the whole thin trust, big trust example as well, and how you do that individually, but how you do it organizationally.
Yeah.
And I think, part of what we're trying to do, I'm gonna answer it different, because I don't think I have a great answer to what I'm saying, no, I don't think so, but our emerging work, I mentioned last in my presentation, we just got funded by Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to fund our Mid-Atlantic Climate Action Hub. And it's called MATCH. But what we do is there's long-term partners who are leading different hubs. In Baltimore, I've been working with them for 10 years. Eastern Shore of Maryland Chicken Farms, 10 years. Prince George's County, 10 years. DC, 10 years. So they're the main hubs, okay? So we're giving them resources to build their infrastructure, right? And so they can do outreach and engagement, and we're getting additional funding to help stack and layer, so help build more infrastructure, right? And so they can be as a hub, they can cover their hub, okay? So for me, that's a model, because we're providing technical assistance to them. They're building the capacity to provide their own technical assistance to the community, the folks in their hub, but they also have money to keep their core staff.
Right.
So that to me is the model that we're pushing on, and I'm really excited because, as I said earlier, we're getting a lot of funding, and it's like, for those of you old enough, for those of you young, you're not gonna remember this, but those of you who know the A-team, I love how the plan comes together. But the plan, it was rough for a decade. I mean, this work with no funding. But I'm not saying you don't need funding, but we have no money. It's scraping and scrounging. It was hard. But now since we put that work in, we have real relationships, tried and true relationships. They've been down. Chicago, you were there when we had no money. I showed when there was no money, right? I was there when they needed, we have, these kind of relationships where we worked hard together through some tough times and consistently doing technical assistance. Even with no money, you can still do TA to help, to get and do service. So that has set us up for success now. And we actually have a trajectory that we can have huge impacts. Another part of it, just to pass the mic on the next question, we also established a overarching coalition too that helps cover the region. So you have these hubs in the geographic area, and then we have this regional coalition. So that's another part of the infrastructure too. So that's a model. So you have these long-term relationships like you have. You create the hub, right? You have the regional coalition. And then you have these different interfaces now that allows you to leverage additional resources. So that's I think a way to move forward. Yeah, thanks.
Does anybody else want to respond to that?
I mean, I think it's, the question that, how do you make something sustainable? How do you turn it from transactional to transformative?
Yep.
And I think I think students know the answers. I think faculty know the answers. I mean, just from, whenever I identify a student that's like on fire for community organizing, I'm like, have you done the Link Award? Okay, you already did that last year. Like, what are the other financial assistance programs that can be birthed that will help students, not after they've gotten the Link Award, and other financial packages? And then the matching capacity, I don't want to pretend like, you know what I mean? Like, we're all set in the community.
Yeah.
Like, we need many, many more community-based organizations. And Brown University, I mean, there's a lot of creative things you can do with that. You can do matching programs, you can help with technical assistance. It's no secret. Sometimes the best, most frontline organizations, like we do, we're not ashamed to say, like, we could use help with grant writing. Most of our members at the George Wiley Center are deep in the digital divide. We're not ashamed of that. We're proud of that. If we were all like middle class folks being like, oh no, sitting around writing grants talking about how great we are. So it's not, we gotta do be real about our skills and figure out opportunities. And there's much more that, students at Brown University as an institution, but the key is that trust part, right? Is that, because if you don't have a process, then the trust isn't there. If people are worried, like, oh, who's gonna, like I said before, I mean, credit, you gotta talk about that stuff the get-go. Like, when you form an organization, alliance, you have to have faith that the other people want you to grow and prosper, and that you're not gonna come in, take credit, and then forget about you. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's, so I think there's a lot of work to be done, but there's models of folks. What Dawn is saying is extremely important, because from a grassroots perspective, like, we sued National Grid. They have 2,000 employees. Like, were we ever gonna have the funding to hire enough people to beat them, beat their number of lawyers? No way. Like, we're in it for the underdog, and if Brown University wants to make the biggest change where it matters most, you have to figure out how you're gonna leverage the resources you have, but build it on the relationships. Because you're right, like, some groups, might just ask you for a matching fund. you know, and to train their members, and that's okay. Some other groups might need other skills, but you have to have the criteria from the beginning in that conversation, so that way folks don't feel like they're getting encroached on, that they're not being listened to, and it's building real reciprocity, real trust. And you know, the reason why I drew that little popular education spiral, because it's not a one-time thing. You know what I mean? It's not like, you know, it's an ongoing feedback loop. You're learning together, and that's precisely, sometimes, you know, for researchers in the community, that's a ethical responsibility that everyone should be taught. Like in research methodology, every single department, you know, if you're a scientist, deductive reasoning, who came up with those ideas? Who's valued with what the questions you're asking? Like that should be part of the curriculum of a good academic institution like Brown University. You need to think about like what questions you're asking, who's at the table, and the issues we're talking about are never class or colorblind. So the resources have to put that in there. Like the George Wiley Center, I can show you a chart, you know, 40% of black households are energy insecure. It's twice as much. So the George Wiley Center, like, it just would not be right if we do not have a majority staffed, you know, majority board. And those conversations are real. You need to have those conversations. It's great. You had Ruth Simmons. That was fantastic, right? And what are you doing to, you know, the changes that it had and that have to be reinforced and built upon to make sure that those doors just don't slam? And we know this model is extremely important on a campus where you have folks graduating, right? What are ways that people can mentor? I know a lot of great students that decided because they came here, they learned about the community, they decided to stay here. I don't know, maybe there's a mentor relationship that some folks can have to support people that want to make that difference, right? I know students can come up with ideas. I know faculty that are doing the work can identify the things. And, you know, I'm excited to hear the report, and I'm excited to support, right? Support, like, the changes and the material, you know, ways that we can build relationships and expand our capacity.
Thank you. Other questions? Jenny?
I do, but I'll defer.
Oh,
Students
who's-
want
oh,
to
yes.
ask something.
I was just sort of wondering, I've heard about community driven research, but I hadn't heard the term participatory action research, and I was wondering if you could just clarify or sort of talk about what that is specifically.
Yeah, they are sometimes interchangeably used, right? There's some conflation too, a little bit. I would say participatory action research is in the family of community-based participatory research. So community-based participatory research is basically communities engaged in all stages of the research process, from development of research questions, development study design, you know, methodology, collecting the data. Some cases to analyze the data depending on the type of study. It is quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods. Dissemination and also translating to action. So that action part, we're engaging with other communities, other stakeholders, you know, government agencies, policymakers, healthcare organizations, right? So that's action. So when you think about the CBPR, you know, communities and human identity, you know, we have good processes, quality process, but about those quality outcomes. Get into those actions where you improve air quality, improve water quality, improve access to housing, right? But community driven, it's a little bit different where you may not need to have an academic partner. You do your own research, right? But your academic partner could be a good ally. Hey, Sacoby, we need some help. Okay, I come and help. Sacoby, we don't need you anymore. Okay, see you later. Okay, you're not, you know, you come in and out. But so I presented last night a form of community driven research, and like I said, it's other community for the community, by the community. You know, they create their own research enterprise. I mentioned last night, Lansing, they created CCRAB, the Charles Community Research Action Board. That's the community R&B. The research comes through CCRAB. That's the community-driven research process. Also, in North Carolina, with WERA, the West End Revitalization Association, they came up with something called community-owned and managed research. Now, that's been around since 1999, but we actually published on it. Most of my papers that have a CBPR component, I have community members as co-authors, right? But it was a response to bad research from my alma mater, Chapel Hill, who did not make it to the tournament. Okay. But it is a response to the fact that researchers were trying to extract their data and said, oh, little community, you can't keep your own data. I mean, literally, really bad. So they came up with this framework and say, we want to make sure there's parity in management, equity in funding. It is about action. And that's why I use the term science for compliance. So for me, community-owned managed research is an example of community-driven research. And you also can apply that to a lot of our indigenous brothers and sisters, their traditional ecological knowledge and what the research they do, that will also fall in the community-driven research bucket. So hopefully, I'll stop talking, but hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, that was great, thank you.
Yep.
Mindy, one more
Yeah, so I do want to ask, these relationships of trust, which are often individual, Dawn's relationship with you is not something that I or anyone else can just step into and sort of, okay, now I'm in this position. So that is very clear to me, and the relationships needing to be personal between organizations and individual people, and then maybe that scales to a university. But I'm also thinking about the students in this as such a transient population, right? And as you started talking about this, but often students are not of the place where they're studying, and most will graduate and move on. So I'm wondering, you talked about mentors, but have you sort of tracked kind of if there's, students that get involved with you here in Providence, is it something that they can then easily connect with another organization where they move next? Or just thinking about the transience of the students and how that compares with the really individual connections between people, not masses of students, if that's clear.
Yeah, I mean, so I could take a stab at it. I mean, and absolutely kind of the institutionalization question too, it is that, I'm not gonna be here forever, but I can almost guarantee the undergrads aren't gonna be here for more than 4 years, give or take. I have seen, students oftentimes when I not all of them by any means, but those who get involved with, George Wiley or African Alliance or the Office of Sustainability, whomever they're working with, oftentimes will go back. And this is certainly not every student, but we certainly see students who say, well, do you think they'd still need help after the project's done? Like, do you think if I called Camilo, he'd be okay if I, helped on any sorts of projects? We've had students who joined the board of African Alliance of Rhode Island while they were still undergrads, because Julia's just really, really liked working with the student. We've had multiple students actually on their board. So within Providence, I've seen that with specific students, certainly. But I think that when they inevitably, go north or south, but they're not staying here, I think they use those skills. And are less, a lot of times it's being almost afraid to be a new member of your community. So I think those students, at least if nothing else, have those skills to try to get involved no matter where they go next, right? And it might, again, just be joining a club or, seeing what's out there that you're interested in and trying to make change in your own community. I feel that at least many of them get that part, that it's not scary to go out there when you're in a new location and to meet others. So that's, I think, what I hope. But again, it's hard because we don't track all of the students, so it's hard to fully measure that.
Let me jump in real quick. So I think a way that we can fix this, and this is, I think, is important, really important question, because you have this cohort, right? You build this pool of folks with expertise, sensitivity, skills that can be really helpful. So once they graduate, or how they stay engaged, we have some professional associations where maybe we can better track them into that as part of a postgraduate experience. So for example, in American Public Health Association, I was there. Okay, I'm getting the APHA mixed up in my head. The APHA has a community-based public health caucus. So that's an opportunity. You can stay in that caucus as a member, right? So if you become a student member, you stay in that caucus. That's a way to connect to other communities. AGU has the Thriving Earth Exchange, right? It's another potential thing. Union Concerned Science is trying to delve into this a little bit and build these networks. I would say the resource is probably underutilized, and I have to talk to Al about this. Community Campus Partnership for Health has a whole listserv, a list of experts. So that's an infrastructure that can be better engaged. So once people graduate, work with CCPH, so wherever you go, you're still professional, you're still part of that network, and then you get matched up with a new community. So I think those type of infrastructures, I think we can maybe should try to better engage them. So you have this long-term sort of trajectory, and when people leave, like I'm looking for a job, well, hey, we have a job. You can work in this nonprofit, work in this health department, work in this agency. And so I think that kind of building that long-term infrastructure, I think is part of the evolution of where we need to go. Because we have these CCBH is celebrating its 25th anniversary. So how can it evolve? Like because I think this is really important. Because we don't want people to miss out, and we don't want communities to lose out on these folks who've been trained and doing great work and sometimes it's hard to find a home in that space. Not even academia and how it's hard for the team promotion, but just a home in general to do this work well. So I will actually follow up with some of my colleagues and say, how are we doing this kind of more pathways of success beyond just the undergraduate graduate program?
Well, it seems, just a quick comment back, that this idea of a caucus also seems like a way of institutionalizing these relationships. And maybe not institutionalizing, but having these networks be able to continue seems like a really
that caucus has been around.
formalize
It's been around for a while. So how do we activate it more
Yeah.
for this particular sort of this objective that we're talking about? So I think that is good, and CCPH is good. Also, the Citizen Science Association, maybe another potential entity as well. But there's several organizations out there I think that we could look. Even I'm not sure even Campus Compact, maybe a little bit. Maybe could be another thing to look at. I'm not sure. I know I heard some voices. So maybe not. Oh, maybe Campus Compact been recorded. Yes. Okay. So I'll stop there.
And I think we're out of time. People have to get to classes. So join me in thanking.